All right. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Institute of Maya Studies January Explorer presentation. I'm Rick Slasek, president of the Institute of Maya Studies. 2022 marks the 50th anniversary of IMS. We hope to make this year a special one. Be a part of this 50-year tradition and help us celebrate by renewing your membership or becoming a new member. It's through our members' generosity and support that we have reached this great milestone. I want to thank the following members for their recent membership renewals and enrollment: George and Betty Lawshe, Janice Van Cleve, Century membership, Catherine Considine, Janet Meese, Century membership, Jimmy Carell, and Mark Givian, patron membership. A longtime member and IMS fellow, George Ferry, has donated 10 newsletters, subscriptions for students. If you're a student attending this evening's lecture and would like to receive a free one-year subscription to our newsletter, please provide your information in the chat box and we'll be in touch. I would like to ask that all attendees remain on mute during the lecture and hold all questions until the speaker has finished. Questions will be invited at that time, and you're welcome to turn your mic on at that time as well. Upcoming lectures, February 16th, it's third Wednesday of February. We have An Archaeologist's Greatest Treasure, The Stories Behind the Science with Matt Saunders. On the 23rd, that's fourth Wednesday of the month, we have Stories from the Palenque Mapping Project with Ed Barnhart. All right, so we have a great lineup of speakers for the year ahead, and encourage tonight's attendees to visit our website and Facebook page for more information on upcoming speakers, Mesoamerican topics, and membership. New membership enrollments and renewals can be made via PayPal on our website, www.institute.mayastudies.org, or by mail. See the chat box for more information. All right, tonight's presentation, we have Subterranean Shrine. I'm sorry. John, I have your title wrong on there, so I apologize for that when I copied it. So anyway, John's going to talk tonight about his cave work in Belize. I am really sorry. Anyway. First documented and excavated in 1928 by Gregory Mason, the Rio Frio caves were amongst the earliest studied caverns in Belize. He called the three caves A, B, and C, although today they are known locally as Twin Cave and Rio Frio Cave, respectively. In his study, Mason noted several architectural features, including an altar, walls, and a zoomorphic cave formation that baffled him because he believed it was made by the ancient Maya. Working under what was later termed the Paleolithic paradigm, he believed that the past people were living in the caves and that the architecture was primarily defensive in nature, used to keep debris from tumbling down into the caverns and to hide and protect the inhabitants from invaders. John is an assistant professor of anthropology at California State University, San Marcos. He earned his master's degree from Florida State University in 2006 and his PhD from the University of California, Riverside in 2014. Both projects were investigations into ancient Maya cave ritual practices at Canquén, Guatemala, and Pacpatún, Belize, respectively. He began his current project, the Rio Frio Regional Archaeological Project, or REFRAP, in 2018, as the first long-term investigation of the Mountain Pine Ridge Forest Reserve, of which the Rio Frio was part of. The lack of archaeological work in the Mountain Pine Ridge Reserve stands in stark contrast to the ancient Belize Valley and Vaca Plateau, which are among the most intensively studied regions of the entire ancient Maya world. Though currently focused on the Rio Frio caves, the REFRAP is a landscape archaeology project that aims over the long term to understand the many ways ancient Maya people and their predecessors lived and interacted with the Mountain Pine Ridge and Rio Frio region. So again, my apologies, John. Please state the name of your speech tonight, and without further ado, Dr. John Spinard.
All right, well, thanks, Eric, so much for that introduction, and no problem with the title. I have a slide that I'll throw up here in a second. I just want to thank you and Keith and Elaine for inviting me to give this talk, and to say it's so nice to see so many faces from so many different facets of my life, both people not seen in a really long time and folks seen fairly recently. This is one of the benefits of the pandemic, is being able to connect with so many people from so far. So I appreciate this opportunity, and thanks everybody for coming out tonight. And for my students, thank you for showing interest in this work, and I appreciate you being here as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and we'll get underway. Now, title slide. All right, everybody, we're good to see the title slide?
Yes.
Screen. All right. All right, so the title of my talk is Enlightening the Shadowy Underworld of the Ancient Maya, Archaeology of the Rio Frio Caves, Belize. And if you're interested in learning more about the project and following us, I have project website, Facebook page, and our Instagram page down there. And I'll have those up for you guys again at the end of the talk as well. So what, as Eric said in the introduction, the Rio Frio region has largely been unexplored archaeologically. The Rio Frio caves have long been known to archaeology since 1928. I'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a minute. But there's other areas of Belize immediately adjacent to these caves that are really well known and have been excavated and investigated for close to a century at this point. Now, one of the reasons why this area of the Maya world has gone unexplored is largely because of the unique geology of the region. And I'll touch on that as we go through the caves, but essentially the mountain pine ridge it was created through a series of granitic upwellings millions of years ago that came through, that broke through the limestone bedrock. And as a result, the soil there is not good for agriculture. And so the ancient Maya were not settled, had not settled in this area in the mountain pine ridge because they couldn't farm there. And the ancient Maya were primarily an agricultural people, an agricultural society. And so these caves that I'm investigating are actually, they're in limestone bedrock, as we'll see, but the limestone has been cut off from a larger bedrock formation. And so they kind of get lumped in with this, just by way of their geography, they kind of get lumped in with this unsettled region. So archaeologists have not spent much time investigating this region. Now, one of the interesting aspects of this area, though, is that there's a lot of really important resources that come from this area that were vital to everyday life. So pine trees, as the name Mountain Pine Ridge suggests, and the metamorphic rock here, particularly the granite, was traded actually throughout the Maya world to make grinding stones for grinding corn and food preparation. So this region provided, the geology of this region provided the foundations for ancient Maya society and everyday life, even though people haven't spent a lot of time investigating it. Now, the caves, though, were not domestic in nature. They were not profane spaces. They were ritual spaces. And so we'll get into that. We'll get into that now. Now, this is not going to be a sort of a typical slide where I give talks. Instead, what I'm going to do is take you through a virtual tour of the cave, talking about the history of the archaeology that's been done at the site. Essentially, there's only ever been two projects here. In 1928, when they were first identified and first documented by Gregory Mason, who spent a couple weeks here at most. And then 90 years later, when I started my riffraff project. Those have been the only two projects to date working here. So what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'll walk you through this and demonstrate some of the technology we use. And along this process, sort of talk about what I've been doing the last two field seasons since haven't been able to travel down there. So I've sort of been doing an archaeology of Mason's work, trying to figure out where he worked. To give you an example of how we're going to go through this, we'll take a look at one of the caves here. And maybe some of you can hear this, maybe not. I hope that you can. But as we look towards the Rio Frio here, which is where the caves get their name from, you might be able to hear a rushing sound. This is what it sounds like at the caves, and this is really a beautiful environment here. You can look around and look at the jungle canopy up above.
I'm going to borrow the computer from one picnic. I'll see you later. Yeah, I'm going to come.
And we come to the entrance here.
Yeah.
Right, and this is the entrance to Rio Frio Cave C. And this is a really photographic, photogenic entrance. And to give you a sense of scale here, what you're looking at, this is my team from 2018 when we first started the project down here, looking at the entrance from this area. And then here's my 2019 team, Ariana, Jessica, and Andres here. And this photo is actually of Gregory Mason standing in the entrance of the cave during one of when he first documented these caves. So this is a photo from 1928. You can see it's kind of the perfect place to take pictures. And if you look up Rio Frio caves online, you'll actually see many people taking this exact same picture here. So here's that V cleft in the rock here that Mason is standing in front of. Now hanging down here, we look up, we see how really dramatic this entrance is. What we're looking at here, these are not vines. This is actually tree roots from the trees growing on the cliff above 150 feet up above us here. So this is, by itself, this is a very dramatic location. We'll come back here and look at the jungle a little bit more, just to give you a sense of sort of what these environments are like here and what the ancient Maya would have been experiencing while here. So you might hear the cicadas in the background humming, birds chirping, and if you listen carefully, there's howler monkeys in the background as well. Now, as we look at the floor here, you'll notice, and if folks who have visited here, there's this beautiful sandy beach. This beach is actually it's natural, and it's a result of the geology that I was mentioning before, and we'll see this more once we get into the cave. This is granite sand here, and what's happened over the course of millions of years, the Rio Frio has cut through this cave and gotten cut down to the underlying geology basement rock here. And so what the beach is here is actually a result of erosion and weathering from over millions of years that have created these beaches out in front of the cave here. And so as we come back over this way, you might be able to hear the Rio Frio flowing again. And so that's just a introduction to the area, give us a little bit of context to the discussion here. And so for folks who may not know, what we'll do is we'll open up a Google map here and we'll fly into the area and see this region that we're talking about. Now, this is Central America, is southern Mexico. As we zoom in, we'll focus in on Belize, and you'll start to see these triangles, which are some of the better known archaeological sites in the region. Caracol, Minanja, Xanantani, Cajalpech, Baking Pot, Pacpatun, and some of the circles here, Tunichil, McNall, Barton Creek, Chechampa, Chapat. The blue line is the McCall River, and then the orange polygon here is my research area that was been granted to me by the Belize government and the Institute of Archaeology. And we zoom in, and we'll see that there's actually a series of caves here. Rio Frio Cave A and B, which are the twin caves today, and these are right across the street from one another. Cave C, which we were just looking at, and two more caves, Tunnel Cave, Closing Jaw, and these are all basically along the course of the Rio Frio or pretty close to it. There's a sixth over here, Domingo Ruiz Cave, that we'll also be talking about tonight a little bit as well. Now, each of these caves, why I have them listed here and why I started investigating these is that here is actually Belize Forest Department's field station. And they've actually put a lot of signage up in this area to these particular caves. So these are actually well-known tourist caves in Belize. So if anybody's ever gone down to Caracol, you might have stopped at the Rio on pools, which are just off the map over here, or stopped at Rio Frio cave, which is over here. So the Rio Frio starts off the map over here and makes its way around, comes up around Douglas de Silva, courses over here, actually enters the hill over here, and then from the east, and then flows down out the entrance to the creek you're looking at in the background here, and flows down to the McCall River. Right? Now you may notice that there's a change in the color of the vegetation over here on the right side of the map compared to this dark green on the left. Essentially what you're seeing here is the differences between the underlying geology. So this reddish, pinkish, brownish area here is actually the granite upwelling. There's no limestone here. On the left side here, this dark green is the tropical broadleaf forest. This is the jungle vegetation. And so essentially what you get are islands of limestone sitting on the edge of this, uneroded limestone sitting on the edge of this granite block here, which is, and it's the water flowing off the granite that cuts through the limestone creates all the caves. It have created all the caves in this area. So that's a general sense of where we are. And what I want to do now is introduce you to Gregory Mason and how these caves first came to the attention of archaeology, to archaeologists. So Mason was an archaeologist. He spent most of his career, though, as a journalist, and he was actually chair of the journalism department, I believe, for Columbia University in New York. He got his PhD in archaeology, but he went on to be a journalist. But he was sort of a turn of the century archaeologist explorer, someone like Indiana Jones. And I really think that some of Indiana Jones was based on Mason. There seems to be some overlap with his sort of his desire for adventure and excitement and getting himself into sorts of sticky situations and sort of bragging to his friends when he got home about it. So he seems to be very much, if not the archetype for Indiana Jones, somebody like that, right? So Mason was hired, or I guess commissioned, by the Museum of the American Indian High Foundation in New York City in 1928 to travel to the Maya region to collect ethnographic objects for their collections. So he was going to travel to southern Mexico and make his way into Belize, then British Honduras, to get ethnographic collections. He made his way into the interior of the country, making it to San Ignacio, the town big town in western Belize. And as he's trying to make his way eventually to Benque Viejo and the Maya village of Sicuts, which is on the western border with Guatemala. But as he was camped out in Cayo trying to make preparations to go to Benque and Sicuts, he actually learned about caves that were pretty far out of town that supposedly had a lot of coal pots in it that was untouched. So given his charge through the museum, and his interest in learning what at the time what he called early man in the Americas, he took the opportunity to go explore the caves. So he got a team together and came down and found that, yep, there were several caves here that were filled with vessels, and so he recorded 3 of them, naming them A, B, and C. 2 of the 3 caves we'll be looking at tonight. The third cave, which is Cave B, it looks like it's a really big, interesting cave, but it's really just 2 small chambers with not a lot of artifacts in it. And he devotes all of 2 sentences of his publications about this to that cave. So we won't be focusing on that very much. But when he was here, he collected. He did. From what I can tell, he did quite a bit of extensive excavations, and he collected a lot of material. So this is where what I've been doing now since COVID came down comes in, and what I'm going to do for the talk here. Mason, his publications were few and far between about this, and I've spent part of the pandemic trying to track down what he did, where he did it, and where the artifacts wound up. So the Museum of the American Indian High Foundation is actually now has been absorbed into the Smithsonian, and so part of the collection that he made is in the Smithsonian. But looking at his correspondence, it seems that he got into quite a bit of trouble with the colonial authorities doing his work here. And that's because he was in the country to collect ethnographic objects. He wasn't in the country to do archaeology, so he didn't have permission to do this. So he was literally caught on the docks with crates full of objects. And he wound up spending a couple days, maybe weeks, maybe a month, waiting for some colonial authority to come to figure out what to do with the collection. Anyway, so what I've been able to piece together is that they got some of the archaeologists up from southern Belize who were down working in southern Belize with the British Museum to come up, and they split the collection 50-50. So it seems like half of the collection is in the Smithsonian, and the other half, as far as I can tell, is in storage in the British Museum, but I've been unable to verify that material is there. So my hope is I'm going on sabbatical next year, and I will be going to DC at least to study and document this collection. Now, why is that necessary? Well, because Mason's publication record, like I said, was pretty spotty. And he was interested in adventure and excitement of the work, and less so with the archaeology, especially with the Frio caves. Okay. So that picture I showed you at the beginning here of him standing in front of the cave was published as a series of stories in Motorboating magazine. And so he talked about his why motorboating is because the ferrymen of the Belize River were ferrying folks using outboard motors, and so he wrote about the how much better it was to have outboarding motors rather than hand paddled canoes. So he writes up his adventures in motorboating in 1929, a series of I think it appeared over 3 issues. And in here, the archaeology is just sort of, it's in the background. It's mostly talking about the interesting folks and all the experiences that he had there. Now, this is for a popular audience, right? But not exactly a scientific publication, right? Really, his only publication on the work is this. And if anybody's familiar with these are Indian notes and monographs that were published by the Museum of American Indian High Foundation. And these are essentially illustrated pamphlets. They're really no bigger than a smartphone, like a 3x5 index card. And this one's 44 pages long. It's got some black and white photos in it of the whole vessels that he recovered. But there's no maps. There's descriptions of the caves. There's general descriptions of where he found some of the artifacts in, but it's a really disorganized report that again focuses more on the adventure than the archaeology. So we get the caves are talked about roughly in order A, B, and C, but he'll mention something. He'll put a figure in, say figure 9, and he'll call it out in the text, and it'll come back in a throwaway comment 20 pages later about, oh, and this is what these look like over here. And so we don't know what the collection looks like, and except for a few of the artifacts that he photographed, or really where they're coming from. So with the technology that you're seeing here, what I've been able to do since COVID has prevented me from getting into the field is really dig into this short monograph to try and recreate what it was that what he found and where he found it. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll go through this cave. We'll go through cave C, which is the Rio Frio cave today, for if you've been there as a tourist. And we'll look at some of what he wrote and some of what he found, and we'll talk about some of the history of this cave. Yeah. Right. I was getting muted there. All right. So what we'll do is talk about what I've been able to piece together based on having this technology here, and also show you just take you through a tour of these caves and just see how beautiful they really are. So we'll come inside the entrance here. Now, the main activity area of the cave is actually a ledge up along here. Okay, so come back here for a second, come outside. For those of you who have been here, or for you who are visiting, there's actually a road that goes right up to the other side of the hill here. You walk down over here, and then there's a path that comes up here to this ledge. And it's really this ledge where most of the archaeological activity where the ancient Maya were working and well, performing rituals and using. So back inside here, this is that ledge along here. And so just take a minute to look around here and get ourselves acquainted, get our eyes adjusted to the dark light, as you need to do. But you'll notice though, this is the entrance we were just sending out over here. The other entrance is right over there. So really when you're in this cave, it's really well lit. You can actually get through the whole cave without a headlamp. It gets a little sketchy over here where it gets a little bit dark, but you don't need a headlamp if you're visiting during the day. So if you can hear the rushing water, I actually recorded that standing right here. And as you can see, the cave flows through, or the river, Rio Frio, flows through the cave here. A lot of formations. A lot of formation harvesting, but not really high up. We're talking about ceilings that are 30 meters tall, 30, 40 meters tall here. This is a massive cavern. In total, it's just under half a kilometer long. Okay, for sense of scale, here's me, 6 feet tall. Okay. And again, for more scale, zoom in over here. Here's somebody standing on the ledge. Here's their head, their arm up to their face and their legs. So this is a massive cavern. Also have a sand beach inside here, and I'll talk about the importance of that here just coming up in just a minute. What I want to do though is talk about some of the descriptions that Mason provided in this area, because again, this ledge here is where most of the activity in this cave seems to have happened. Why I say not under here? Well, the cave would have flooded at least to about this high at times, not every year, right? But we can see in the walls of the cave, especially when you're there, how high the water can get. And so any evidence of ritual that may have taken place down here, at least anything on the surface, would have washed away hundreds, centuries ago. But the ledge up here is well above the flood stage of the cave. So this is where most of the activity seems to have taken place. So let's look at what Mason wrote about this, to understand a little bit more of the archaeology of this place. Because this is a grand setting, an ideal place for sort of large-scale public ritual to have taken place, right? And talking about a place of spectacle and power, right? This is a kind of cave where you would think that people would go for those kinds of rituals. So he talks about here at the very beginning, at the entrance of the cave, he said, "I found a structure which I have called an altar, although I am uncertain to its use. This was 30 feet long, 9 feet wide and 4 feet high, built out from the perpendicular wall of the cave and constructed of loose stones without mortar. Now, unfortunately, it seems that he actually mentions this, he said he excavated it completely. There's absolutely no evidence of where this was on the surface today. Gone through here dozens of times and there's no evidence of any architecture here. So it looks like he completely excavated it. But he noted that there's a boulder sticking out here that the platform was built up against. And up against that platform, we talked about a really thick layer of ash, a thick deposit of ash. And excavating in that ash, we found a bunch of jade objects, ear spools, buttons, and tinklers. Right? These are the objects he took out of there. So we get this idea of spectacle. In ancient Maya world, jade was often associated with rulership. Right? It was the object of high value, and so we get very valuable objects being deposited here. Right? He said, now below the altar, between the altar and the steep slope down to the river was a terrace, partially artificial, averaging 20 feet wide. This was littered with sherds of many kinds. 4 to 8 inches below the surface were quantities of the shells of freshwater snails. One polychrome sherd, so a ceramic with more than 3 colors of paint on it, and 3 sherds with embellishment and high relief were found here, as were a possible pottery coil and a flint core and a limestone ball, which may have been a sling stone, and a ball about 3 times as large. The best things from the surface of this terrace, however, were several large fragments of 2 incensarios, so incense burners, of the studded reddish sandy ware type. And so we're lucky that he actually published pictures of these objects. So here is the chert or flint core with the tip broken off. And these are what he called the sling stones. This limestone, slingstone, and metamorphic rocks, probably granite. Now these may have been monos, so rocks used for grinding. We're not really sure, again, because we don't have access to the collections, you can't say for certain. It's unlikely that they were sling stones though, because people were not living in these caves and they were not going to war in these caves that we know about. Another possibility, and it's not uncommon to find grinding stones in caves. Another possibility is that they might be, again, you need to study these more to learn about them, but these actually might be a special kind of divination object called a sastun. And sastun are rocks that Maya daykeepers and shamans and healers can use basically for fortune telling. And so it's possible that these might represent some kind of sastun rather than a sling stone. So some kind of divination rituals being performed here. Now these are the sherds, the pieces of the decorated sherds that he talked about, the polychrome piece right here, and the ones that have the high relief ones. Now he kind of just mentioned these as a throwaway comment, as you saw, but these pieces bear striking resemblance to anthropomorphic censers, incense burners that are found at the site of Caracol, 15 miles south of us. Now, I'm not saying that people from Caracol were coming up here. We actually have no idea who are using these caves yet. That's a question for future research. Next time I get down there, it's one of my aims is to figure out who is using these caves. But what we see is that these are not just mundane pieces, but these are actually probably belong to censers like this that the Maya were using for burning incense. And at Caracol, these vessels they call them face caches down there because they're vessels with faces on them that were found in caches, so buried deposits. They're in domestic context, seem to be related to ancestor veneration. I don't think that's the case here, but again, without further study and continuing our work down here, I don't know for sure that that's how these are being used yet. But there does seem to be some kind of relationship with Caracol, or at least a cultural connection with Caracol, again, 15 miles south of here. This is a spiked incense burner that he mentioned, having the sort of the best piece. Right? He said he found a couple of these. And these are also known from Caracol. See these spiked sensors here again. All these vessels date to the late classic period, so roughly 700 to 900 AD. Right? So we're talking about late classic period here, which is in line with other chronological use of caves throughout the Maya area. So it does seem that, at least with the architecture here, the focus does seem to be on sort of theatrical performances at the entrance of this cave. And we get polychrome ceramics, we get these fancy ceramic incense burners. And you can imagine incense burners lining these terraces here, burning and filling the entrance of the cave with smoke. And anybody standing outside looking in would see the smoke pouring out of the entrance of the cave, right? Pouring out of the mouth of the cave, breathing aromatic rain clouds up into the sky. Right? Aromatics, rain, there's a relationship between incense smoke and rain clouds, right? They're both dark black smoke that brings sweet things. Now, he continues to talk about the ledge here. And he says, along the cave wall, one could tread nowhere without stepping on sherds, so pieces of ceramics. The majority were rough common sherds, but many bear incised designs, and not a few are decorated with patterns and colors, usually red, black, and yellow, or red, black, and orange. So again, he publishes a few of these pieces here. And these are pretty small. He says this lower specimen, the diameter here is about 8.5 inches. So these are, dinner-sized plates, dinner plate-sized vessels. Interesting patterning on here, sort of four corners motif here, if you will, on this vessel. And here are some other pieces that he talked about, or that he published. This is a common type to the Belize Valley. It's Dolphin Head Red, which is in the Dolphin Head Red group, which is the early part of the late classic period, so 600 to 700 roughly AD. And then this one here, this again, another reason to get to DC is that this piece down here looks like it actually may be from the early classic, an early classic basal flange bowl or plate. So again, we might be able to extend the date of use here to the early classics. So basal flange bowls come in around 250 or so and kind of go out of style around 500 or 600 AD. So we're looking at about a 250-year period. So assuming this is early classic, we can say that the cave was used throughout the classic period, even though there's probably definitely some earlier use here. We don't have evidence for it, but given the size of the cave, how intensively it was used, we do likely have some older usage here. Now, the other thing I want to point out here is, again, the Maya seem to have chose this ledge for rituals. Part of that is that this is sort of the natural path into the cave, and it's sort of a place that you would just naturally go to because it's up above the water and you get a really great view of there. But I think that also serves a purpose to relate it to the sort of theatrics of the cave and the ritual performances in here. So if we go back over here go further into the cave onto the beach, right, we can take a look back over, and this is the area over here where that platform would have been. And this is looking down from the ledge up here down to this beach down below. Right, so very easily visible, and assuming they're performing rituals in here in the dry season, the river is not going to be much higher than it is here now. And in fact, it may have been lower, which would expose more of this sandbar. So there could easily be several dozen people watching a ritual being performed on the ledge here up above in this really dramatic background, right? This backdrop of this cave that has water, life-giving water flowing out of it. So this is a really powerful place just from its natural characteristics alone. And I think that the Maya were drawing on these characteristics of the cave. And I think this is probably an elite performance space that they're drawing lots of people in to watch the things that are happening, the rituals that are happening up on the ledge here. Right? So even though Mason gives us some really vague descriptions and disorganized descriptions, we can kind of get a good sense of an idea of what was happening in this cave and the importance of it and how it was being used. The other thing I want to point out here too, and we'll see this when we go on to the next cave, is he mentions that there was actually only one jar that he recovered from here, jar fragment recovered from here. He does mention, go back over here. He does mention, right, there's some rough common sherds, but there's no jars. And why, we'll see in a few minutes here why this is significant. But there's a lot of bowls and a lot of plates and a lot of, again, sort of the polychrome pottery that, again, suggests some kind of theatrics, some kind of visual component of this, right? But there's a different kinds of rituals being performed here that we don't see. That's different from the other cave, Frio cave. All right, so we'll continue on with the tour here. This is kind of the main portion of the archaeological portion of the cave. But just to get an idea of to bring you all the way through the cave, so you can say you've walked completely through Frio cave. We'll continue over here. And so here we are at approximately the middle of the cave, and we're looking out here. We're looking back to where we just came from, and you can see the water of the Rio Frio here reflecting the light coming in from the entrance we were just at. And that ledge ends abruptly. It just drops right here into the river. And actually there's a bit of an overhang, a really precarious overhang that you would think is solid rock, but if there's a hole in it, you look through and you're actually standing on a really thin sheet of thin carpet of carbonate rock, and there's just a precipitous drop down to the river below you into the dark. To give you a sense of scale again, though, I'm going to zoom in right here, because this here is a person standing on the edge of that ledge. And this here is actually not daylight. This is actually their flashlight shining on the wall here. So you can get it zooming out here. You just get a sense of scale, just how big this cave really is. Even being able to walk through it digitally, virtually like this, it's really difficult to comprehend the size of this cave. Now, Mason does mention a series of steps on the other side of the cave. And this is at the edge of that other ledge looking across. And you can actually see the terraces here. These are travertine dams. From when it rains, the water flows down and creates these pools here. And so actually what you can see here, which is really interesting, you can see the contact geology here of the limestone that's eroded away, and the rocks down here are actually all granite, the granite bedrock. And so you actually have the cave growing over the granite down here. Now Mason talks about these, and he says, here are terraces of hard-packed sand, which the prevailing easterly wind was sifting into the cave even while we were there. Excavation through several feet of drifted dust and sand here might yield something, so he never excavated here. But I believe that probably such artifacts as may yet be found in this part of the cave will be discovered in pockets along the side. For man was probably as much averse to mild but frequent sandstorms in those days as he is today. Right, so he says, standing here, you get sand and dust blown in on you from the entrance over here. So you said the Maya probably were avoiding this area. But so once we go further towards that entrance and further into the cave, we see it becomes a very different cave, and there's not a lot of area for activity here. This whole area where we're standing here would have flooded. Right? So if there was any ritual activity here, it would have been washed away centuries ago. And pretty much there's no floor here. It's the sloping cave wall and then the Rio Frio flowing through here. So we'll step out into their entrance, and now we've made it to 400 meters through the cave to the other side. And again, we see a dramatic entrance here. We haven't done any work over here yet. Spent very little time over here. In fact, it was my co-director Mike Mira who took the photos for this part of the cave, and he's been the only one spent any time over here. It was just to take these pictures, but it looks like the other entrance is really the primary area of ritual and ritual activity in this cave. And so what we'll do now is we'll go to the other cave. We'll go to Cave A, and I'll take you through a tour of that pretty quickly here. And then this is Cave A has been the focus of my investigations the 2 seasons that we've been down there. We'll come back to Cave C in future seasons. One of the reasons I haven't been working there is that it is a tourist cave, and we're concentrating this other cave. So it's on the to-do list, and we got plenty of time to do it. But we've been focusing on Cave A for now. So I'll take you over there and bring you through, and you'll see this cave is much different character than the other one. And so this is one of, if you've been down here, this one's listed as one of the twin caves. Right? So, but this is Mason's Cave A. He named it A because it's the first one that he documented. And he describes it this way, and I think he does it justice. He says, the first one sees of Cave A is a gash in the hill, about 10 feet wide and 40 feet long, under a lip of bare limestone. At the right, south, extends a considerable cave with several subdivisions or chambers in which sherds were found. But the entrance to the main cave is at the left, the north side, and steeply downward. And as you can see, it's a pretty good description of the cave. So his descriptions are not bad. It's just been useful to have a map and a little bit more information that was of archaeological interest rather than sort of recounting adventures. Right, so we'll take a step inside here and look around a little bit. So this is the south part that he was talking about here. For time, we won't go in there. There's not much of interest in there, but we'll focus on. I'll talk to you a little bit about what's happening out here. Then we'll go inside and we'll talk more about what's happening on the inside. So Mason doesn't spend as much time talking about his work here. So this has been a little bit more difficult to recreate. But because also too, so few vessels are published, what I wanted to do was, our first point of interest was getting a chronology of the cave. And so looking around the rock shelter entrance here, okay, so here's the north side of the cave, and this is the way down, and we'll go down there in just a minute. So looking through the mouth of the cave here, the rock shelter entrance to the cave, what we actually found was a really extensive ceramic scatter in this area here. And so all these little triangles and rectangles and geometric shapes you see here, that's all ancient Maya pottery. Right? So this looked like it was a really good place to excavate to get some really good chronological information. A really dense ceramic scatter here, nothing else like this in the entrance of the cave. So we excavated down. We didn't get to bedrock, but most of the ceramics were actually just on the surface. What we found underneath, though, as you can see here, there's this really thick layer of white or gray soil. This is actually a series, dozens of bedding events of bedded ash deposits. So what we actually have here is a series of rituals, one after the other, after the other, after the other, where they're burning something here, right? And so this is I think why the ceramics are here is that this is a point of interest for the Maya, partially because there's a little bit of an overhang right here. I think it's a little bit of an alcove, and it's a nice nice place to perform a burning ritual. Now, unfortunately, this material is still stuck in Belize, and I haven't been able to get back yet to study it more, to export it. But we do have a bunch of charcoal samples that'll get radiocarbon dated. But amongst them, though, we actually found several immature corn cobs, or at least what appear to be. I'm not a botany expert, so but these look like immature corn cobs to me. These are actually not uncommon to find in caves. And research by Chris Morehart in the Belize Valley, he's documented several examples of these. And what he's found, and what he's argued, is by comparing to agricultural societies, what we see is that farmers will typically take the first fruit of their harvest, or the first fruit of the season, and bring it to a ritually potent place to thank whatever supernaturals or spirits there were for the successful bounty of the upcoming season. And so it seems to me, based on that what we actually have here is evidence of first fruit ceremonies being performed here. So this is a place of agricultural ritual, right? And the fact that we have, layer after layer after layer, this actually might be a seasonal record of farmers coming here and performing these agricultural rituals to thank the spirits of the cave, which is where agricultural fertility comes from, for the successful harvests. Now, unfortunately, the ceramics were not very diagnostic, so I don't have really good chronological information about them. But it does seem that the dates are pretty similar to what we found in the other cave, late Classic period at least. The few diagnostic pieces we have are late Classic period. A few early Classic period examples elsewhere in the cave. So again, this cave is being used at least during the Classic period, but we don't yet have a really good handle on the chronology of it. Now, what we also wanted to do, based on mine and my co-director's years of experience working in caves, what we found is alcoves tend to be ritually potent places as well. And so we put an excavation unit in this alcove over here. And here's my co-director, Mike Miro. Here's Ariana. Yana is one of my former students excavating. I'll just go over here real quick, introduce you to these folks. Here we go. This is Javi Mai, my foreman and valuable member of my team, and the person who's brought me to all the caves I've investigated over the last 15 years. My student Andres. All right, so excavating over here, again, we didn't excavate down to bedrock here, but what we actually found was we caught, at the end of the season, we caught the edge of a plaster floor or tamped earth floor. Now, what this suggests, right, is that the Maya are coming here and actually preparing a ritual performance surface. And plaster floors are not actually uncommon in caves. Holly Moyes, working down further south in Belize, down in Las Cuevas, has actually found quite a lot of this kind of ritual activity in this area. So it does seem that there's ties with the folks down in southern Belize, down in the Caracol Chiquibul region, as well as ceramic connections with the Belize Valley. So we're this really interesting area of sort of two cultural influences coming together, the north and the south here. All right, well, we'll head into the cave here and just bring this up really quickly. No, it's not gonna have that pop up. So Mason basically mentioned a large wall. And I think we froze. Oh, there we go. Okay. Okay, a large wall of heavy stones that had been put across most of the entrance by the ancient inhabitants, probably both to make the cave easier to defend and to keep large stones from rolling into it. Now, Mason's partially right that and I'll get into this here in just a few minutes why, he's partially correct that the intention was to block off this entrance, but it's nothing to do with defense or keep large stones rolling into it. For one, people were not living in these caves, as I mentioned, mentioned in the abstract for the talk. Mason was working on this Paleolithic paradigm that caves were places where people were living. We now know that that's not the case. The ancient Maya were performing rituals in caves. They were not living in them. But they had intentionally blocked this entrance off. And here is, he mentions the stones being really large too. And some of these stones are massive. This is as big as I am. Again, I'm about 6 foot tall. Right, I won't tell you how much I weigh, but you get it's good enough. 6 foot tall. Right. So these are massive boulders that they're bringing in here to block this off. And they've created a the terraced area here. Now, we haven't excavated in here to determine whether or not this was a performance surface or something else, but it does seem, even if it was, it served another purpose. And to understand that, we have to go further into the cave to see. Okay, so here, this is the steep path down that he mentions, right? We're basically standing right below that entrance. You climb down this formation and hop down here into this small chamber here. Again, very, very different kind of space than the other cave that we started our tour in. Okay. It's a very small, restricted space. And here's half of me coming up to give you an example of scale here. Right, so this is not a very big space. Oops. This is a couple things of note here. Coming down, this seems to be, there's a lot of rubble right here, and this actually seems to be, there seems to have been ancient terraces or steps going down, leading down this slope passage here from up above. Okay. And mixed in between here, we got some polychrome ceramics, and this is probably. This is an early classic period vessel, a rim of a basal flange bowl. So again, this is some of our evidence of early classic period here. A couple things to point out here as we go into the cave. At the bottom of this chamber are 2 windows, natural windows in the cave wall, one here and the other one right here. The cave, the passage does continue around this formation here, and you pop out on the other side. You climb down, you pop out on the other side to a bigger chamber. But this is the windows here. Both of them, you can see these rubble piles here. Both of them had walls that were blocking them off in the past. Now these are actually taken down. These were torn down when Mason was here. But when Mason visited, he mentioned that these walls were collapsed. But these also, the fact that these were built does help us understand what happened at the entrance here. And the modification at the entrance. So we'll go in here. This is the chamber that Mason called the cathedral. And it's very different geologically than other parts of the cave. The walls are sort of like decomposing mud, mudstone more so than limestone. It's a really heavily dissolved chamber. And it echoes, and the other parts of the cave don't echo very much. So you get this massive ceiling again, which again at the end of right behind the other chamber is a very small restricted chamber. So this opens up to a huge area. We'll come back around over here, and these right here are those windows from the other chamber, and these are just straight drops down 25 feet down to the ground below. These series of pictures are actually taken on top of one of the big boulders in the middle of the room. And what you're looking at here is actually the ancient ceiling of the cave that collapsed sometime in the past, and it rolled and tumbled down and it fell upside down. And so you're looking at ancient ceiling formations that are now pointed up. Okay. So we're standing on one of those. So this cathedral chamber here can hold a lot of people, but it's almost like a labyrinth as you navigate through these boulders and these formations here. Okay. Now, why were these blocked off? Well, it's not to keep people from passing through. you would have easily seen that this is a drop. So we'll come back to that in a minute, but just keep these in mind as we look through here. Now, what Mason points out is this large boulder here. And I bring the condition of these rocks up here for a reason. So this boulder here, he calls this the balcony. Now the balcony is another one of these massive ceiling boulders that has fallen down in the past and had all those formations in it, under it. But when it hit the ground, all those formations now have created this complex labyrinth without any rhyme or reason underneath it. And it's under here that we find some of the most extensive collections of pottery in the cave. But unlike the big cave, it's mostly jars. And he's collected dozens of these, and there's still hundreds and hundreds of rims still in this cave, in piles. Some are broken, some are partially or partial vessel. But you see, based on the ceramics alone, this is a much different type of activity being performed in this cave. Okay? And so this whole area under here is just littered with with jars. Now, to get up to the balcony, one could go through the labyrinth here. I haven't done it because I don't want to get lost under here. There's also a chute going up over here. Now the chute brings you up underneath the boulder, you pop up through the other side here, and you come out on top. So we'll go further into here. And this is the top of the balcony, above the balcony. Now to give you an example, to give you an idea of what this looks like from down below, okay, here's the chamber down below. You might be able to see some of the walls here. And this is standing in the cave looking up where we're looking at now. So we're standing where Mike is standing here. Here's that column behind. And right, so this is what's happening up here would have been very easily visible from the chamber down below. Now dominating the balcony up here is this formation. And here's Javi standing next to it to give you a sense of scale. And this is the formation that Mason struggled over to figure out whether or not it was created by the Maya. Undoubtedly, it's a natural formation. These are not unusual in caves. There's nothing particularly geologically distinct about this. It's just, you can see the crack in the ceiling where the water would come down, and it, over the course of millions of years, created this formation. Right. But let's step behind it a little bit. What we see is that there's actually a lot of activity area around here. And this seems to have been a focus. And for the ancient Maya, these kinds of columns, and especially those in the back of the cave, were important ritual locations. They were foci of ritual performance. And so what we'll do here is take a quick look at a 3D model of this, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. So we can walk around this a little bit better here. Now, we were just looking at it from this side here with Javi standing next to it. But what we actually have here is down below. Zoom in here a little bit. We have a lot of burning, a lot of charcoal activity over here. And Mason actually mentioned finding some vessels with copal incense in them. So this is an area of ritual activity. But you'll also notice this bulbous part of the formation here and this hole. Okay. Now, Mason studied this, and he talked about this looking like the Maya serpent. And we actually took a closer look at these and found that these should have been, these originally were small columns that connected down here, but these were most of these were broken off from the ancient past, and we do have some evidence of regrowth on them, which tells us that the breaks happened in the far distant past. And so what we actually have here is a column that was purposefully modified, right, to create this visage, this fierce visage. Now, for sake of time, we'll go back over here, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. But to do this again, I want to go back over here and talk about theatrics, right? So now, when we're in this cave, when we're in this chamber, right, there seems to be the focus of activity. People actually performing rituals up at that column. Now we can think about these windows in another light, pardon the pun, if you will. So we'll go back here even, right? So what we get when we look up at the entrance here is this massive terrace at the beginning, at the entrance, actually heavily restricts the light coming into this chamber. There's still some that seeps in, but it blocks a lot of the light that would have otherwise been coming in. Now that light, because these walls, these blocked windows are knocked down, that light still does percolate through here. And you can get a little bit of residual light coming through. But remember, in the past, these were actually blocked off. And so what seems to be happening here is that the Maya are using these formations not as defensive purposes, but actually create absolute darkness. The way that the cave has eroded, light doesn't come through here where we enter the chamber, but it does come through these windows. And so they blocked off these windows to create darkness in here, right? So one of the things that we can get from this is that it seems likely then that the rituals were being performed in the daytime, because you don't need to block the light at night. Right? Sunlight's not going to come in at night. So it does suggest that maybe they were performing rituals in the dark. But what we get is theatrics, right? They're creating a sense of darkness in here, and absolute darkness. For what purpose, right? And that purpose seems to be the events happening up here on the balcony. Right? Again, this is going to be looking up at the balcony here. Right? We can see folks up here. We can see the performances. We can also see the fires burning that would have been burning up here. And because the chamber's echoes, we can hear the participants down below could hear the prayers being said and the invocations being made, and the ritual performance happening. Right? Now, but the theatrics doesn't stop here, because the attention now is focused on what's happening up on the balcony, right? But what we actually get up here then, as a result of the modifications made to this, right, is, we'll go back here to the 3D model. We get this fierce visage that would have been projected through shadow along the cave wall. Right? Now imagine this is firelight. Come back over here, and we'll see a different version of it here. Right? Now imagine this is firelight. You're down watching below, you're hearing the prayers, and you're not sure that they're working. Now with the chamber completely blacked out, the only thing you can see is up above you, and the chamber's filled with smoke. It's filled with incense that's being burned up here, and fire is flickering at the chamber up here. And you look at the cave wall and you see this fierce visage dancing in the light, bouncing around. And you're using theatrics here. They're using light and shadow to conjure these spirits of the caves, whatever they're trying to do up here, which we still don't know. But they're conjuring this supernatural entity who lives in this cave, and they're manifesting it through the modifications made to this formation here. So we get this play of light. So you think about this collectively, we get the blocked entrance, that massive wall at the entrance, and then those two blocked windows. They were creating a theatric atmosphere to perform these rituals here, to demonstrate the power of the rituals, right? To demonstrate the success of it, because the people can see the being manifest on the wall down below, and they can watch it dancing and being alive. So this was undoubtedly an incredibly powerful ritual place that that was a major focus of ritual attention here. And they spent a lot of time and energy to create this sort of theatrical stage, to create this. I think this is ultimately what those modifications are for, is to create the theater around whatever the rituals were being performed up here for the audience down below. Now, one last little thing here is, let's see, we go to the back of the cave. So what would the rituals maybe being performed here? Well, at the very back of the cave, there's actually a stream back here that most likely, through underground passages that we haven't traced yet, actually probably connects with the Rio Frio at some point along the way. And so this was actually, it looks like a dry cave. It doesn't have a river flowing through it like the big Rio Frio cave, but there is water back here. And for the Maya, caves were sources of water. And these kinds of far water at the back of the cave was some of the most potent water that's available. It's seen as incredibly pure. It's the kind of water that caves emit out, breathe out as rain. So it's likely that that ritual then was related to probably rain. Those conjuring rituals were related to rain. And Mason does mention that he came back here and he actually dug up some of the flowstone back here and uncovered a few crude bowls that were probably filled with incense and some kind of offerings, although he doesn't say what those might have been, or if they were full. If they might have been organic material in there as well that got washed away or taken away dissolved over the years. We get this sense of theatrics. We get this sense of shadow and light play. The Maya were manipulating these underground environments in really complex ways that we're really only starting to comprehend. Okay? And so it's some of this, understanding how these caves were being used. Yes, they were being used for ritual, but what did those rituals look like? What were those purposes of these rituals? Okay. These are all the kinds of questions that I'm asking with my project. So I know we're pretty close to being out of time here. So I will say thank you again for those of you who came out tonight and for listening to me talk. And I just want to throw up my acknowledgement slides here. Just want to reiterate that this research is being done with permission from the Belize government, from the Institute of Archaeology and Forest Department. So many people have helped both down in Belize and logistically and on my project. So thanks to all these folks for helping out, and thank you again for coming out tonight. And if you are interested in supporting this project, we do have a QR code down there that you can scan, or you can visit that website down there and to help us continue on with this research. So thank you very much again for your time and for having me out here. And I will open it up for questions, and I'll leave this up in case anybody wants me to go back anywhere and talk more about any of the things that we've seen tonight.
Very good. Thank you, John. That was a fantastic lecture. Really appreciate that. So right now, if anyone wants to ask John directly questions, please feel free.
Hey, John, Jim Reed here.
Hi, Jim.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Can you mention anything about the burials that were found on the other side of Cave C, on the other side of the river?
So he doesn't talk too much about them. He says they're found near the entrance. One seems to have been associated with that, and we'll go over here and take a look. So one does seem to be associated with the altar that he mentions here, but he said that it's kind of piecemeal. There wasn't a lot. Sort of degraded, disintegrated bone and not in very good condition. And he does mention a side passage somewhere that does seem to have that he did find some jade ornaments with. Haven't been able to locate that yet. Again, his descriptions are really kind of not very not very
Vague.
good. Yeah, vague. Thank you for that. And so, you know, I don't think he collected any human remains. It doesn't seem that he did. Again, I only have the records I've been able to get have been what the Smithsonian has. And I don't think in his inventory that he collected any human remains. I think it was just objects, ceramics, and some of the stone material.
All right.
So we actually do have, we did find some human remains in the entrance of the other cave, Cave A, in the rock shelter entrance. Just a few pieces, again, in really bad shape. And we're going to, next time we get down, hopefully this summer, we can expand our excavations in there and see what's happening there. But you know, it's not uncommon, especially in rock shelters, to find human remains in Maya. We're putting deceased in there. I'm reluctant to say burying deceased because we don't fully understand Maya mortuary practices. Sometimes I mentioned caracol before, in some of these vessels here. They're actually found with finger caches, these small cache bowls that are filled with fingertips that might be evidence of mourning, or some kind of auto amputation related perhaps to mourning. So, you know, finding that's not a burial. It's human remains, but it's not a burial. It's a ritual mourning process. So, you know, we do find human remains interred in rock shelters, especially. But you know, whether or not they're burials, and especially here, don't know enough yet to say much about them.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just going to say that I was in Rio Frio Cave A in the early 70s. I lived in Belize during that period for about 5 years and was attached to the archaeology department and spent a lot of time in Belize caves. And I remember at that time, there was a huge vampire bat colony in the cave. And there was a globular storage jar, exactly the sort that you showed a picture of, completely filled with bat guano. You can imagine that it was exquisitely nasty.
Yeah.
But from the images you showed, it doesn't look like the bats are in there anymore. And I know that the Belize government had gone through a major vampire eradication program. And I'm wondering if you have any memory of where the bat colony might have been, or any evidence of it.
Thanks for that question, Barb. And you know, you're somebody who I've needed to reach out to for quite a while now, because I know I'm familiar with your work and that you've been up in that area before. So thanks for coming out tonight and asking that. You know, I don't know. This is actually the first time I've heard about that. What I do know, this is not necessarily related to that, is that the broadleaf forest. So out here, the broadleaf forest in the Mountain Pine Ridge Forest Reserve, the forestry has complete hands-off management of it. They don't go back there. They're not doing anything back there. So I don't really know. You know, the Cave A is in the broadleaf forest too. So I don't know. I don't know. Is the short answer. Kind of surprised to hear that. And I know we may actually have some folks from forestry on who I might be able to get in touch with later and see if we can track some of that down. But and there's certainly bats, but they're not the vampires, at least none that I've noticed. None have bitten me. So
Yeah, no, this absolutely was a vampire colony. And I know that in the 70s, the government was assiduously going after the vampire colonies because they were biting the cattle, and a lot of cattle and horses turning up having rabies as a result. So there was a good reason to go after them. I went into several caves that had large vampire colonies. I mean, totally nasty places that you wouldn't want to ever go back to. And my understanding was that some of those caves were targeted for bat eradication. So I do have one more comment about Rio Frio C, having to do with a cache of those same shallow bowls, small shallow bowls, found up in the ceiling of Rio Frio Cave C, by the British Army on one of their expeditions. They used to do a lot of caving expeditions, and they must have had a climbing pole or some kind of apparatus, but you know, those guys that carry all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And they got up into a hole in the ceiling, and those vessels were, when I was working there, they were in the archaeology department vault. And I remember finding them in there one day when I was kind of puttering around and thought, wow, those came out of the ceiling of Rio Frio Sea. There were a couple dozen of them, and a lot of them had copal in them. Just
Really?
melted copal. So you might, when you go back again, try to track those down. After that, I went back to Rio Frio Sea. I've been up there many times and went back there again and tried to figure out where in the ceiling that hole must have been. And I think I figured out where it would have had to be. And it would have been off of that main ledge that you've described that has most of the artifactual material. And it was an area where it looked at those as though there was a hole up in the ceiling that if you'd had the right kind of an apparatus, a ladder or something, you could conceivably have gotten up there. But I myself couldn't figure out how I could get up there. But just worth knowing about if you could reconstruct where that might have come from. It reminded me of Lacandon god pots, but there weren't any effigies. They were just simple little bowls.
Interesting. Thanks so much for that. That's more that I haven't heard about these caves, and evidence I should have reached out sooner.
Well, just go into the archaeology department and see what they've got on Rio Frio Sea, because they had some stuff.
Yeah, certainly. Thanks so much, Barbara. Appreciate it.
Sure.
John, we have a couple of questions in chat. Kiefer Nail is asking the software that you're using. He mentions Agisoft.
Yeah, Kiefer is, yep. Hi, Kiefer. It is, this actually, we've
Hey, John.
this is Pano 2 VR is the software that this is in. It's not Agisoft.
I have a question.
2VR.
Pano, P-A-N-O. Let me see. P-N-O 2 VR. I put it in the chat for you.
Okay, thanks. That was a question from Chris. He was very excited. So
it's really cool software.
Yeah.
Oops.
I have a question.
Yes.
Tell him your name.
Mm,
Tell him your name.
My name is Abby Grayson.
Nice to meet you, Abby Grayson. I know your dad well.
Okay, ask your question.
Did you see any monkeys outside of Cave C?
That is a really good question. I have not seen monkeys outside of this cave, but I've certainly heard them. I've heard howler monkeys. In other caves I've been in, I've certainly have troops of howler monkeys and spider monkeys have come through and sat at the entrances and thrown sticks and all sorts of other gross things down at us.
Now we're going there, Dad. Now we have to go there. Now we have to go there.
Sorry, Ron.
I'm a monkey right now.
Well,
Okay, enough, bud. All right.
excellent. Well, yes, they're this is their homes. They live outside these entrances, and so we're visiting,
Gotta go.
and so they're certainly part of the environment around there, and good thing about caving is that you got your helmet on, so when they throw sticks and rocks and those other things at you, it hits your helmet, not your head.
All right. Say thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question.
John, Lorraine is asking, is there evidence of food storage?
That's another really good question, Lorraine. There is, I will say that there's debate about that. So we get these storage vessels, and I don't know if you all can see those yellow lines across the screen. I'm not sure where those came from. Can't get rid of them, but the jars, especially in some of the other caves in Belize, not the ones here that I've worked in the Rio Frio, but we do find evidence of some of the jars being used to hold foodstuffs, corn, especially some beverages as well. But there's also some research by Jim Brady when he worked at Nocturnich Cave. He told me a story about how he found a bunch of these jar vessels and washed them and tried to dry them quickly by putting them in the oven at a low temperature. And as they heated up, they started to smell incense. And so, so some of these big jars that I showed may have been used at some point in their lives as storage vessels, and then sort of maybe later used as incense burners. But again, some vessels we do find, not in the Rio Frio caves yet, I'll say. So certainly won't say that we won't ever find this, but we do find some evidence of food being stored in some of these. But then there's sort of another question to ask about that. Is that food storage, or is that some kind of a ritual offering? There's a lot of rodents that live in the caves. There's bats, as Barb mentioned. And so, the caves are not ideal places to store food that you're going to eat. So it could also be related to agriculture, some kind of feeding of the spirits and the supernatural beings and the other than human people who inhabit those caves.
John, Sherry Lynn Kurisu has her hand raised for a question.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for that, John. I'm so excited to be able to call you a colleague, and even more excited for our students at CSUSM to engage with your work in your class. And also, thank you. I mean, you took us there, right? It wasn't just the 360 pictures, it was your description. That's the closest thing I've had to a vacation since the pandemic. So thank you for that.
Me too. You're welcome.
We don't get out much. So I know you had mentioned a few things that you're looking forward to doing when you go back, and I was wondering if you could just tell us what's like the top 1 or 2 things that you're most excited about to investigate further when you're able to go back after, when it's safe to do so and travel.
Yeah, really good question. There's so much, like thinking through this and being able to revisit these sites and really dig into Mason's writings and pull out of it. There's so many research questions that have come out of there, but I think sort of the most pressing question is really who was using the caves. Mason talked about people living in the caves. That's not the case. There's has been no recorded settlement in the area. So that's kind of the major question. Are these long distance pilgrimage destinations, or perhaps, is there a local population that hasn't been documented yet that were using them? Undoubtedly, the artifacts coming out of here, what Mason pulled out and with the jade and with the polychrome, connections with Caracol. I mean, these were people who were heavily involved in the culture of the region. So it does suggest some kind of local population, but until we get back, we can't really confirm that. So I think that, that's kind of the most pressing question, and getting a better handle on when these caves were being used, because we have a really general chronology, but it's different areas were being used at different times for different purposes. And sort of getting to see how those uses, how the cave use changed over time.
Thank you.
Another chat question from Juan Flores Bengoa, and he asks, this ceremonial cave is totally abandoned, or has it been used recently by locals for ceremony?
Another really good question. So I'm digging into the history of this area a bit more. There is the local community I work with is in Maya village of San Antonio, and there I just recently got a hold of a published history of the settlement of that community, and they're descendants of refugees from the caste war, coming down from Yucatan. And there is in that history a discussion of people living in the Augustine area, which is where the forestry, Douglas de Silva forestry camp is. And the person who reported the cave to Mason did talk about some Maya folks coming in from Guatemala, perhaps decades ago. So there does seem to be so the Maya folks from San Antonio are not direct descendants of the ancient Maya from this area. This area of Belize was largely depopulated, but they're coming from a different area. So there's not continual usage. If anything, there would be a hiatus of probably a few hundred years between when the region was likely abandoned or left, and then when the Maya folks came in, and that was the late 1800s, early 1900s or so that the folks settled up there. Interior Guatemala, we're about 8 to 10 miles from the border here with Guatemala, and of course, there you get into Tayasal and the sort of post-classic occupation of northern Petén, and so it's possible that folks were coming here then. But so in terms of usage today, no, it's these caves are tourist caves. There's no local population in the area. The closest would be San Antonio Village, which is about an hour drive away or so. Although I understand there's a new road that's been paved into the area that may actually be a super highway that will make it a much shorter trip to get here. But there's no local population here outside of the workers at the forestry camp and a military base next to that. So no modern ritual activity here.
Hey, John, I lived in Sokots Village for a year and a half back in the 70s. And I had a Maya friend. And one of the things we did was his family had horses. We took a horseback, like 3 or 4 night trip back into the Maya mountains. And there are some very nice caves along the trail there where you're going up to other homesteaders and meeting other people. But I found this beautiful point way up in one of the caves, up on one of those ledges that you describe. I noticed little footholds in a big giant boulder, and I followed it up, and there, where there was deposits of black guano down in a place where for thousands of years water had dripped. For some reason, I just dug down there and I found the beautiful point. But for Ron Grayson's little girl, if you'd want to Google Chechemha, it's another cave that's right outside Benque Viejo, which is right next to Sokots. There's other big giant olas, like you showed an example of, John.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them, I believe, has a little sculpted spider on it, but one of them has a sculpted monkey face on it. So if you go down there to get hit by stuff from the monkeys, you might want to investigate that cave. And they've taken the vessels out, investigated them, but put them back in. And you can probably still get a tour from the man who discovered that cave. He was walking through the woods and his dog went through the bushes and into a hole, and he opened up that hole and found this beautiful ceremonial cave. But it's Chechemha.
Yeah, I've actually worked in that cave.
Yeah.
And let me see. There's a new publication out by Christoph Helmke, and let's see if this will actually work. There's some of those vessels from Chechemha, not the monkey one, but the oyas with the bowls on top, so they look like they're mushrooms.
Oh yeah, I was talking about the really big ones. I mean, that are 2.5 feet big, round.
Yeah, they're just not showing up very well with the background.
Oh, okay.
With the background here, but yeah, those are the same size, those person size ones.
Yeah.
It's we've actually found. I was going to talk about Domingo Ruiz Cave and ran out of time to do that, but we actually found a similar point in a small travertine pool in that cave too. Looks pretty similar to the one that you had, and that's trying to understand what those lithics were being used for. Because they often get cached in these little corners and just little deposits just stuck in a like you said, like a little pit or a little niche in the cave, and just somebody walks by and sticks it in there and probably says a little thanks to the cave and just goes on their way.
Good night. This is John August from Belize.
Hi, John.
Hi, John. I heard you mention just a little bit a while ago that there's no evidence of close community to the Rio Frio cave. But I do know of a site that is on, if I can remember correctly, it is on not too far away from the Rio Frio cave on line 1.
Really?
Yes, up in the Mountain Pine Ridge. So
Okay.
I have knowledge of it because I was a conservation officer working in that region for quite some years, and I did some quite intense on the weekends, of course, walking in these jungles and surrounding just wandering off, look into caves and stuff as such, So I will be more than happy to show you that Mayan site I'm talking about that is on line 1.
That would be wonderful. I know I know we've seen some small mounds and things around. And I know one of the reports that Holly Moyes published, she mentions a couple paragraphs about a site up in the limestone, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's settlement to find back there. I mean, it's great farming land, difficult terrain, but down there's a survey of the where the Chililo Dam was done, and they found an extensive bunch of settlements down there. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's settlements out near here that just with the lack of archaeological attention, archaeologists haven't been out here looking around. So I'm not surprised, and I look forward to visiting with you maybe this summer when I come down. We can meet up and you can show me where it is.
Of course, it'll be my pleasure. As I said, there's also areas where you can actually see. Probably there were not settlements, but there were probably areas where they were doing some works like on tools or something like that. Quarry area where they were getting out material to make tools and so forth within the Mountain Pine Ridge that I do know of. So.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I would love to see those too. I know those are going to be up there. Just all that, there's so much of that material coming out and going, getting traded into households all over Belize, Guatemala, Mexico. And so I know I know that's up there to still find again and document. And again, I would love to talk with you more when we're down there and go see some of these sites that you know about. And thank you for offering.
No problem, man. Thank you for the presentation, actually. And have a blessed night.
Thank you. You too.
All right.
John, have you come across any petroglyphs or graffiti or anything in the caves at all?
Nothing ancient. Unfortunately, this cave A, is, let's see if we can actually, I'll go back in here. And this especially up on the balcony, there's a lot of modern graffiti carved into the cave walls up here.
Too bad.
This if you look at the column here, I don't know, can you guys see those yellow lines? Is that blocking your?
Yeah, we've had
we
that.
see 'em.
We've had that happen before, John. There's a way to get rid of it. You have to kind of restart your program and everything. So if you want to do that, you can do that, I believe. But it's there, but it doesn't bother me personally.
Okay, as long as it's not bothering anybody, we'll just go ahead and we'll go ahead and leave that. But let's see if it picks it up here. Yeah, so when we zoom in actually here, all the white here, it's all machete chopping. You can kind of make out some names carved into here as well.
Yeah.
And then there's this whole ledge. There's formations all around the ledge going back to the creek, and every single one is just covered in graffiti. It's just people carving their names into it. So it's really unfortunate that, you know, I mean, it's a beautiful site, and beautiful cave.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all these formations. They all have carvings, modern carvings
Yeah.
on them. You know, you can kind of see here. You can make them out, some of the scratches here. Down below, where you come up from what we call the birth canal, because it's a really tight crawl up underneath. But you come up from down here, and there's a big natural boulder, a flat boulder, and hundreds of names are just carved into there. So it's now I haven't seen anything ancient. You actually see here somebody carved an arrow into
An
the
arrow.
rock
Yeah.
way down. So yeah, I mean, this is unfortunately this is you know, this cave's gotten a beating from people coming in here, and they haven't treated it well. So it's so that, you know, we get modern petroglyphs, if you will, but I haven't seen anything, nothing ancient. The modifications, though, like I said, you know, we get the modifications to the column here. Actually, you can see all the carvings in here. Really
yeah.
Right? You know, all this whole thing has been chopped up. But here's, you can also see better the teeth of this thing that have been chopped down. They would have connected down here. So we get this is, you know, is this a petroglyph or this ancient Maya modification here? Or is it, you know, you kind of get into a semantic argument, but nothing ancient that I've seen yet. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if we do find some around. I know elsewhere I've come across petroglyph panels in caves, especially ones that have dripping formations and formations that are active during the rainy season that are growing. A lot of those get simple faces carved into them, 2 circles and a line for eyes and a mouth. So I would suspect that we would find them back here, but so far to date we haven't seen any. Nothing has jumped out as immediately obvious to us.
Got it. There was another question in chat, John, again from Kiefer, and it asks, she asks, are you planning to publish some of the stuff you have dug up on Mason and the early work of the site?
Yeah, so once my, I will, hopefully admin of my university is listening. If I get my sabbatical approved and get tenure next year for my sabbatical project, after I get out to DC and get to study the collection that's in the Smithsonian, then yeah, I'm certainly I'm pursuing this as publishing. But I want to, you know, right now, you know, I can do a visual presentation, but until I get to see some of the artifacts he's collected in that, you know, limited to what I can say and can't say based on that. But you know, he's a really interesting character. I mentioned at the beginning, I really think that Indiana Jones was sort of modeled after him, and so he's a really interesting historic figure. And you know, so I think just sort of a biography of him is interesting in how his research here is, how, you know, related to his research here.
I totally agree. I would love to read it.
Thanks. One reader.
Well, that was me, John. So I mean, I'm nudging you to write it.
I'll get on it right away, Kiefer.
Thank you.
Thanks for the nudge.
John, Lorraine is asking, and this is a good question, I think, because I was curious about this myself. What about bones?
Can you be a bit more specific?
They weren't specific, but it just says bones. But we'll start. I mean, I'm sure you found animal bones. I'm assuming. Any human remains, or other than the ones that you sort of mentioned?
No, we haven't actually done extensive excavations here yet. Most of because the project was really getting underway, we've only had a few weeks of excavations to date. So a lot of this has been piecing together what Mason did and what he found and like I said, we do have some human remains from the rock shelter here. What they were, were they a burial or not? It was really just a piece of lower vertebra and a coccyx, so a tailbone. And Kiefer, I hope I said that bone correctly. So really not
Good
too
enough.
much in terms of bones. I will something that I have in here. I'll show you. One of the areas I think that Mason excavated in here. He doesn't talk about it, but it looks there's a really old disturbed area up under the entrance here, and that had been dug up a long time ago. And we actually did recover from that back dirt there a piece of very heavily polished bone tube, and then also a bone pin as well, bone needle. So, there's some bone. We actually don't have very much animal bone yet either. And this is actually something interesting that came up when I was doing my dissertation research just north of here at Pocpatoon, the caves around there. We didn't get much faunal bone, which is really surprising in a cave. You would expect at least bats and rodents, but
right.
I don't know if it's a preservation issue or if it's just, we just happened to miss it in all the excavations we did there and so far here. But we've gotten some shell. We've gotten hute. Mason mentioned the river snail. Those are hute. They're conical snail shells that live in the freshwater streams and creeks, and we found them a lot in cave contexts. Whether or not they were food, sometimes they're used as architectural fill in settlements, kind of food source and construction material, perhaps related to ritual performance in caves, or maybe just heard them talk to about being something like peanuts. You just snack on some hute while you're watching the ritual, and you just a lot of different interpretations of those, but they're kind of ubiquitous. They're everywhere in the caves. So we get a lot of some shell. We got up here in the excavations of the rock shelter. We did get what I believe is a conch shell pendant as well. So we do have some animal remains that have survived, but not as just not just bones, but just a lot of shell. Not a lot, but some shell. So the preservation is okay for that. And it obviously burned corn cob survives. So
Don, is the hute spiral lopped or not?
I don't know. It's been a couple years since I've looked at it. Although I will say, the discussion of spiral lopped, I think we need to be careful with thinking they're food, because sometimes the tips will just break off, and sometimes even if the tip is broken off, the shell almost needs to be snapped in half to be able to actually get the meat out of the shell. If you look at some of them that have been spiral lopped, they're actually not getting down to where the muscle would be attached to the bone, to the shell, and so it's just a broken tip rather than something that would have been eaten like sucked out of the shell.
I agree with you. I've actually attempted to eat hute, and yeah, you do have to cut it down pretty far.
Yep.
So it was not pleasant, by the way.
No, I've had them too. San Antonio started doing a community festival, and they've had hute soup there, and it's I've had it. I've had a few bites of it. I'm not a shellfish person, so eating snails. Also, I quit those with shellfish. It was not. I'm glad I did it. I got a couple hute out of it, but it was something that I have tried.
An acquired taste, maybe?
Yes.
I just didn't grow up eating shellfish, and so any kind of thing in a shell is just kind of I've never had an appetite for it. But the soup was good. It's just the snail. It's just a little too much for me.
John, Jim McCarty sent you a note. He's asked me to let you know that he sent you a personal chat Thanks.
All right. Hey, yeah, so I think, let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay, thank you, Jim. I will reach out to you. I was invited to do some caving in San Diego. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. And I'll look forward to talking with you more about that. I'll get in touch with you on Facebook, as you suggested.
John, I have one more chat question, then I'll open up the floor to last question, and then we'll get ready to call it an evening. So Andres asked, will you be doing any excavations inside Cave A in the summer?
Andres is, I'm assuming Andres is this Andres over here, who has excavated Cave A with me. I think probably we'll be doing some work in Cave A, continuing with the excavations in there. So, you know, the plan is pretty wide open at this point. So we can talk about it more, Andres, if that's you in this picture.
Very good. Any last questions for John?
Yeah, this is Peter. I've worked with John way back. John, I wondered if, while you're working up there, if you get an awful lot of tourist interaction during them months.
Well, hey, Pete, good to hear from you. And thanks for coming out tonight. You know, I've had not a lot. I'll say we've had people, you know, a few people a week. But you know, there's kind of a regular stream of tourists coming in. We haven't. I think most people are probably going to the big cave, to Cave C. You know, we've spent most of our time here in Cave A. And so we've had a few handful of people come in. And actually, when I was doing a little bit of work in Domingo Ruiz too, and I had a solo person come in then too and chat for a little bit about they're visiting and exploring the Pine Ridge. So there's definitely people up there. I think there's a lot more people going to the big cave and overlooking these at least. So you know, there's plenty of folks coming by, and I think every day working in Cave A here, we can actually hear people driving down to Cave C and back and forth. And so there's always people going over there to the big cave at least and visiting that one. So this one's a little bit more off the beaten path. So, but we still have had a handful of people come by, and you know, I've talked to the Belize Tour Guide Association, and if any of you guys are on here tonight, you know, I'm happy to talk with tourists. It's, you know, if they're coming through this area, everybody's been really respectful. And you know, when we've been done for the day, or if we're going away for the weekend or whatever, we just kind of put some tape up around the excavations and ask with a sign that asks people not to disturb them, and never had a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, these other caves at the back there, I mean, I've visited them a long time ago, and most people didn't even know they were there. So it was just the main big one that they'd gone to. But thanks for, I was just wondering whether they were becoming more and more active with people around there, that's all.
Yeah, you know, I think they are. And I mentioned before that my understanding is that there's now a super highway going from the Caracol Junction down to the Blanco line at least, and they're planning on paving the rest of the way down to Caracol. So, you know, they're trying to beef up tourism in this area, and so I think there's going to be a lot more folks coming in. I don't know what the plan is for paving the road to the cave, but it's such a short strip. I imagine that they're probably going to do that at some point as well. So I think with that, there's going to be a lot more tourists coming into the area because it's going to be so much more accessible than it was. Even last time I was down there 2 years ago. My understanding is that the road from Cayo to San Antonio, at least now to Blanco, is completely paved. So it's much easier to get there.
Wow. Well, thanks so much. Really enjoyed the evening. Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. And hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah,
Can I make a
absolutely.
comment before we all close off? This is John again.
Hey, John.
Yeah, I heard you mention about tour guide. I'm also a tour guide at the moment, so I just want to make a comment in reference to the job you'll be doing or have been doing at these caves. I'm very familiar with basically all the caves within that region. As I said, I spent quite some time up in the Mountain Pine Ridge as a forest officer or a conservation officer. It's quite interesting, these caves, but I must make mention to you guys that we need to keep in mind that these caves, while I was working out there in the early 90s, when Chate became a very big thing in Guatemala, that these caves were heavily looted by these chateros that were coming down from Guatemala. Some of these disturbances you've probably seen in these caves are from chateros that have been looting these caves in that region. I personally came across a lot of them in these caves and had to, like, you know, drive them out at some time, personally arrest some of them and took them to court and so forth. So yeah, we need to keep that into consideration, that a lot of the artifacts has been taken out by these chateros also.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you know, I know, especially in the interior, once you get beyond Cave C, it's you know, it's unpatrolled wilderness basically out there. So I appreciate it, and you know, and I know, you know, to keep an eye out too, and just being careful with the research out there as well. Yeah, thank you for that comment, John.
You're welcome. But at the moment, the chateros are not basically problems anymore because of the heavy patrol within the Chiquibol. They have been deterred a lot. So FCD has been doing a great job in deterring most of the chateros now. So it's not as bad as then, you know. So
yeah.
But anyway, have a pleasant night.
Thank you. You too.
Lastly, John, Sherry Lynn asked if there's a link to donate to REFRAP.
Yes, thank you for that. Let me step out of the cave real quick into the bush, and here is that. So the QR code there will bring you to. We have a crowdfunding campaign with my university that just got underway. That we're looking to establish a research station down in Douglas de Silva in coordination with the forest department, and so trying to get that funded so we can not have to drive 2 hours, even though there's a beautiful superhighway. Drive 2 hours to work every day, to actually focus on the research and less on driving and burning fossil fuels.
Wonderful. We'll give it a moment here for anybody to get that scan. All right, well, John, I want to thank you so much for this evening. The talk was fantastic, and the Q&A afterwards equally so. So again, thank you for your time. It's much appreciated. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. I want to thank everyone in attendance as well this evening. Just a quick reminder, February 16th, we have Matt Saunders, and on the 23rd, we have Ed Barnhart. So we look forward to seeing you next month. So everyone have a good evening, stay safe, and we'll see you next month. Bye.
Thanks, Eric. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, John. Check your chat, please, John.
Will do.
Mm-hmm.
Good night.